Hello and welcome to Films and That. My name's Rob Turnbull.
And my name's Sam Hall.
And today we are looking at Playtime by Jacques Tati.
What made you pick that film?
Well, I think that visual comedy is really a lost art nowadays, and this is a great example of it.
Too true. Let's take a look.
A befuddled Frenchman wanders around a hypermodern Paris, farcically struggling with its modernity. This review contains spoilers.
You happy with that?
Yeah.
What's hypermodern?
Oh, just kind of what it sounds like, isn't it? So Tati himself plays this character, Monsieur Hulot.
Yeah. Who's kind of his tramp character that Charlie Chaplin has. Is kind of the parallel there. Should we start with him, actually? Because I think there's a lot of interesting parallels there. And a lot of people have talked about this, that they're kind of opposites in many ways. In terms of their physicality and things like that. Like Monsieur Hulot is very tall and he seems to lean forward quite a lot, whereas Charlie Chaplin leans back. Just little things like that.
Yeah, it obviously has its roots in things like that, and Buster Keaton and people like the Marx Brothers, a lot of that kind of old Hollywood comedy. But he went to mime school, so he's obviously a physical performer. And he got this character that was quite successful, and a few films off the back of this character. And my understanding is that with Playtime, he really didn't want to do this character anymore. He wanted to do something else, but he had to kind of fulfill that role to get the film made.
One of the big things you notice about the film is you hardly ever see Monsieur Hulot's face. And you know going in that he's the central character because he's this huge, larger-than-life character. And you're almost saying, where is he then?
Yeah.
But you pretty much are saying that right from the start. You know?
Well, one of the first gags of the film is like someone's dressed like him, and you see him from the back, and then someone goes, "Oh, Mr. Hulot," and he's like, "No, I'm not him."
Yeah.
I'm not Hulot. What are you talking about? My name's Smith. I think you made some sort of mistake.
So that's a big like fuck you to the audience. You know, you were looking out for him, but he's not there. In like Mon Uncle, for instance, he's like the central character.
Yeah.
Whereas he starts out being the central character in this, but we do kind of branch off and we do look at other characters as well. And Hulot does become just a part in this larger whole. Yeah,
that's kind of that's what makes it so interesting and so strange. In many ways, it's not a film that's really been made again. I mean, I'm sure it has on a certain level, but in terms of something that as big a production as this, you know, and something that probably did quite well worldwide at the time.
Well, actually, yeah. Oh. Let's talk about the production, because the production values are great, aren't they? They built all these buildings. They built these sets of all these cubicles and like these kind of stark colours. He wanted to film it in colour, but make it look like it was filmed in black and white.
Yeah, it was sort of greyish, greenish colour. It's like the dominant colour for that basically the whole third.
Tati built all these things himself. So he built the buildings.
You mean
the miniatures?
Oh right, okay.
No, not himself personally.
People scare me when they say these things. Like, surely that's not humanly possible. No, he would have died, especially at his age.
What I mean is, they didn't just go out and find locations. It was constructed.
Oh yeah, yeah. You can. I mean, no offense to the film, you can tell it's a set. But then you couldn't make this film without it being a set, really.
Yeah, because it is kind of larger than life. And Tati put a lot of his own money into this film, and it didn't do well at the box office, and he eventually filed for bankruptcy on the back of this film.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of destroyed him.
There is a lot that's relatable to it, but at the same time, perhaps the humour is perhaps maybe a bit too subtle, maybe?
It takes it, yeah. Well, this is the problem with it. If you're going to see this in a cinema, you know, you really need to watch this film a couple of times to kind of pick out there's little things in it, because it's shot mainly wides and extreme wides, basically, isn't it? So there's no close-ups at all, and everything that's happening within the frame is like there's something happening down here close to the camera, and there's something happening over here far away from the camera. So you've got to like look across the entire breadth of the screen to get everything.
It's like a film based on the concept of deep focus.
Yeah.
And every sort of section of the screen, from the foreground to the background, has something happening.
My favourite gag of the film is there's these cubicles, and one's in the foreground, one's in the background, and someone's ringing up someone in the other cubicle and saying, get me these figures. And the guy walks all the way down and stops next to the cubicle where the first guy was, picks up some figures, goes all the way back, and then calls them up and says, yeah, these are the figures.
Yeah.
And it's not only a kind of visual gag, but it's also a real comment on, you know, the bureaucracy of these people. You know, he can't just go around and get it himself. He has to go and call up this person to go down this place. And that's what makes this film really special, is the message it tries to portray. So Hulot, he's more concerned with the old Paris. At one point, he spends 10 minutes trying to get out of a flat. And it turns out it's because the button's in English and it says push. And there's lots of comments about things being in English. And I kind of feel it's more nostalgic about the way things used to be. And one of the other characters, Barbara, she's like, oh, I want to get a picture of Paris. And so she's trying to get a picture of this lady by a flower stand, but then some American teddy boys keep kind of popping in the way and kind of ruining her shots. And later on, when she's going into this big glass building, she opens the door and there's a reflection of the Eiffel Tower on there. And she kind of stops to look at this Eiffel Tower. You know, she's more interested about the history of Paris and kind of the old school humanity of it. But then she kind of whisked away into the building to look at like a mop with some headlights on it. Some kind of like stupid invention that they happen to make at that point.
It rings true even today, doesn't it? You know, the amount of people that go to London and what they want to see is the old buildings, the palaces and things like that. But what London wants to sell them is, look, we're almost like you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, we've got McDonald's too. You know, the whole of London is just strewn with things just trying to make it more modern and more commercialised.
And more homogenous and more kind of less interesting. Like, there's a real obvious comment about, you know, everyone's doing the same thing. There's a load of businessmen with the same briefcase, the same hat on, getting in the same car, driving off at the same time. It's all just kind of mechanical, isn't it? You know, Hulot at one point turns to watch the person and he's getting stuff out of his briefcase and he's doing it like a robot, like he's just programmed to do it. And there's a real kind of sadness there about the loss of humanity, I think. It's interesting to get that in a comedy film, which is not something you'd see today at all. True, especially one in a kind of subtle way that it does it. This is truly a film with no exposition. There's very little dialogue at all, is there? It's kind of... In fact, all the dialogue there is almost inconsequential in a way. You can still get across what's happening without any sound. Well, not sound, but not without dialogue. Well, here's the test. Like, because obviously we don't speak French. A lot of it was subtitled. My version of it, some of it wasn't subtitled, so they just couldn't be bothered to do it, or they didn't feel it was necessary for the plot at all to subtitle this person speaking.
Chaise royale là. Envoie ton bon. Tu peux le prendre, c'est sortie touriste au fond. C'est pour les américaines là-bas. Oui, d'accord. Oui, mon vieux, ne t'inquiète pas. Merci, tout de suite. But actually, sound does still sell the gag. The drunk character who keeps on falling off his stool, for example, you know, that's made all the more funnier by the sound of him thudding on the floor. That's kind of the punch line, the thing that sells the gag in a way.
Well, there's one gag that is almost entirely about the sound. There's a load of seats that he keeps trying out, and every time he sits down on them, it makes a funny noise.
Yeah.
And like, it's that kind of juxtaposition of making that funny noise and him just kind of being quite serious and in a quite serious environment. That I think that's the gag there, isn't it? It's not a visual gag, it's actually an audio gag. Well, let's talk about just generally the plot, I guess, because there is a structure to it. The first third of the film is Hulot. He goes to the city for a meeting or something, so he gets an appointment with someone, and he spent ages trying to find this person, and then they get whisked away at one point. Oh, sorry, I'm busy, you know, then they get rushed off. And it's all about him struggling with their technology.
What I find interesting about that is if you take someone like Frank Spencer, like he's a man who takes something perfectly normal and destroys it. In this film, you get the understanding that it's not Monsieur Hulot that's the faulty thing.
Yeah.
but he's just the one that ends up destroying it.
And a lot of the time, it's not just him that struggles with it. Like there's an old man who's he's trying to work an intercom system, and he opens it up, and there's just a mass of buttons. And he starts like pressing loads of buttons, and it sets off an alarm.
Oh, another thing. One person I seem to remember described it as "Where's Wally?"
Yeah,
Live action "Where's Wally?"
it gets. I know what you mean. It gets particularly difficult when we go to the second chunk of the film, when we go to the restaurant. I found that a bit of a hard watch, to be honest, because it just kind of there's so much going on. It kind of overwhelms you to a certain point.
Well, that's interesting. I felt like my attention had kind of settled by the final third. The first third, I'm just sort of still getting a feel for it, and the final third, my brain has sort of even after a second watch, my brain is still having to adjust and take time to sort of get used to the way it works.
It's like you've got to train your brain to a different way of watching films. Then it's not just this is a person speaking now.
That's how I felt.
Yeah.
It happens over a course of an evening, doesn't it? This restaurant scene. It's where most of the gags are, I'd say, because you start off with just when they're opening and when they're still getting things ready, and I think the key moment in the opening of the restaurant is when is it the manager or one of the waiters or something is walking along and a tile gets stuck to his foot, and it's like they're immediately saying something's not right, or
they're not ready to be open, basically.
Yeah.
Sounds good. They seem to know their business.
It is delicious.
So, what?
So they're kind of building this restaurant while people are coming in to eat. So there's
and finding fault with it even as it's working. Yeah.
And everyone actually has a wonderful time, even though the kind of modernity has fallen apart around them. I really feel that this film is saying about, you really need to have that humanity among all this sterile consumerism. We can have fun even though things seem quite mechanical around us. We can do silly things. And that's what life's about.
Yeah.
Do you have any favourite gags that you like?
Oh, it's so obvious, but it is the broken door.
Oh yeah, that's a classic.
Yeah. Hulot smashes a door, unfortunately, and the doorman, trying to keep his position up, decides to hold the handle of the door and then move it as people walk through.
Yeah.
And this imaginary door. It's a wonderful gag, I think.
If he just kept doing it for like 20 minutes, it wouldn't have the same impact. But because he does it once and then you go away, you come back and then something else happens. Like at one point he tries to shut the door for someone and they just walk through. Yeah. So it's like, oh, yeah. So he kind of like keeps changing it slightly each time, doing something different, doing something more interesting. But this is what I mean about, it's a lost art, this visual comedy, because nowadays a hell of a lot of films are just, actors improvising at each other. And the scenes go on for ages. I'm thinking of like, these SNL characters, people that have come out of SNL.
Which is their discipline, I suppose. So that's, comedy does kind of come along in trends, and you say it was a lost art. I mean, it was a dying art in the 60s and 50s because of sound.
Yeah. He's a great actor, Jacques Tati. He's got an incredible physicality to him. And I think he does study people quite well.
Yeah, there's an interview, I think, when he talks about the difference between a British traffic warden and a French traffic warden, and just the subtleties of the difference of how they work. And that's it's an insight into how his mind works. And like you said, he comes from a mime training background. That's intrinsic to a mime, is watching how people work and pointing out the sort of the subtleties, to bring alive someone without any kind of visual representation, essentially, or vocal one. It's like an impressionist through gesture.
The French is absolutely different.
And there are so many people who just are convinced that filmmaking is just turning a camera on and watching things unfold. It takes so much effort and precision to get everything to work the way you need it to, because filmmaking really is about turning an idea, bringing it alive. and it's almost impossible to do that. Nobody's ever made a film that looked exactly like it did in their head.
No, never. Yeah, it's always down to constraints. I think this film was plagued with issues. I think it took like 7 years to make or something.
Well, to be honest, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and they had to rebuild some of the set because there was a storm or something, and it wrecked the set. So,
God.
So I think it just about killed Jacques Tati, and I don't think he made many films after this.
How could he? He was old at the time, wasn't he? Or middle-aged?
Oh yeah,
At least, yeah.
He was quite old, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm surprised it wasn't his swan song. I'm surprised it wasn't his swan song, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Je fais peut-être ce que je veux, mais je paie ça également, cette liberté artistique, je la paie très cher, rassurez-vous. Je suis content d'avoir eu le droit, enfin c'est déjà très important, c'est un privilège peut-être d'avoir fait 4 films que j'avais envie de faire. Il y a peut-être énormément de gens qui ont certainement des films qu'ils voudraient faire, qui n'ont même pas encore pu tourner un court-métrage. Bon, j'ai fait 4 films, je les aime, je les ai faits, mon histoire s'arrête là.
So Sam, did you like this film?
I think I'm going to have to put it in the bin marked appreciated.
Okay. That's a cop-out, isn't it?
It's, well, maybe. Perhaps I do like my humour to just be a bit more grandiose. I'm just so amazed by how much of a feat this film is. That it never ceases to amaze me how incredible an achievement it is. So it's a massive appreciation, but it's not one that I can personally watch and over again and enjoy.
I really liked the message it had. Like the first third of the film is my favourite bit of the film, and I'd be quite happy if it was just that bit, because this kind of homogeny is something that really interests me, because it's something that I think we are still pushing towards, and something that I'm quite scared about, to be honest. And to someone to recognise that and satirise that in the 60s is quite interesting, and it really spoke to me, the first third of the film. And it has more of a clear kind of goal, you know, it's got Hulot going towards an objective for the entire thing, and I think that works better for me, whereas the later bits of the film, it's just, he kind of felt like, why am I watching this at some points? It's kind of like, well, what's going to happen? Where's this going?
No, that's interesting, because it seems like it chimed with you more in the first half on a personal level, particularly like the critiques on globalization, things like that. But for me, I found more to enjoy in the second half, because it was the humour was a bit more.
There's more
upfront.
humour. There's more humour in the second half. There's more gags, but that's because there's more going on. Like when it gets hot and the plane melts. Maybe that's why I probably enjoyed it a bit more than you, because I was a big fan of Clouseau and those old Pink Panther films.
Oh, okay. Although, you know, they're not French, right?
What sort of stupid question is that? Are you blind? Yes.
Okay, that's it for this time on Films and That. Thanks for watching and subscribing. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.